Next, we have Justin Richer, who is an independent consultant, formerly of the MITRE Corporation, and he's going to tell you about how to run or not run a standards group.
All right, good morning, everybody. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Justin Richer, and I've done a lot of work in various standards over the years. And yes, Kyle, I'm very loud. You might want to knock that back a little bit. Thanks. And so I've worked on the OAuth protocol, OpenID Connect, and a whole bunch of other different things, written a couple of RFCs and other random stuff like that. So I've done a lot of work in the standards space, and it's come to my attention that some of you might think that you want to help run a standards group. Why? Why would you want to do that? That's absolutely crazy talk, right? Well, there's actually a really good reason, and that's that we like standards. Standards help us actually build the world. If you go to the store and you buy a light bulb and you can bring that light bulb home and turn it into a light socket and it actually turns on with the electricity that goes into that, that's because there's a set of standards that dictate how that actually works. The fact that I can take my computer and plug it into the wall and electrons come out of that and make my computer work and don't make it into fire instead, that is all because standards help make things work. And standards allow us to build some really cool stuff, even when the parts that we use to build those things come from different places. So no longer do I have to go to one place to get all of my bricks and everything that all just look alike because that manufacturer decided that's how they look. I can actually build some new and interesting and colorful things with this. And this is a really powerful thing that allows us to build the world that we know today. So the thing is, where did these standards themselves come from? Now, there's a lot of misconceptions about this. A lot of people take a look at this and say, well, okay, we've got a problem. We've got a cart, and we've got kind of this gap in the roadway, and there's a shark down there, and sharks are bad when it comes to cars, so we want to avoid that, and we want to get across to the other side. So let's get together a bunch of smart and reasonable people, and we'll put them in a room, and they can sort of talk things out with each other and debate a whole bunch of different solutions and come up with a way to, maybe we'll need something that's about yay wide and needs to be reinforced and stuff like that, and the best idea is going to win because these are smart and reasonable people, and they're talking about all of the best ideas. So the problem is, this is a ridiculous hippie fantasy, and it's not how the real world works, because the real world is messy. The real world works a little bit more like this. You got an idea that we have a car and there's a gap, and we heard that there's a shark, and maybe it's on the other platform, or maybe it's somewhere else, we don't know, but sharks are involved somehow, and we're going to say, hey, we need to solve this problem, so who wants to help solve this problem? And somebody's like, I love sharks, I'm going to help, and all sorts of different people are going to show up, and you have really no control over who's going to come in and do this. And the thing is, when all of these people show up, they're going to have lots of different ideas. Somebody's going to be like, oh, we need the zigzag brick framework because that's going to be totally awesome. It's going to solve everything. Somebody's going to be like, we need an escape ladder and warning signs because we need to make this safe and compliant and all of this. And I guarantee you, every single time somebody's going to be like, dude, this thing needs sweet chrome pipes on it. Because yes, right? And so you kind of bundle something together with everybody's different requirements, and if you squint hard enough, you get something that mostly works. That car's probably going to make it apart. And instead of our shark being disappointed about not being able to eat the car, it's mostly just going to be confused as to what the heck is going on above its head. The reason for this is that much like sausages, standards are made of people. Sorry, I'm going to back off from that a little bit. Standards are made by people. And people are messy. People have motivations and goals and backgrounds, things that they're trying to do, and these things that they're trying to do are not necessarily related to the things that they tell you that they're trying to do. So that makes the world a really complicated place. Today we're going to look at a cast of archetypal characters that you're probably going to see in the standard space, because ultimately when you're working on standards, when you're working on things that allow things to connect together, you're going to be running into the people, and that's what's really going to be driving this whole process. Now, a handful of these, you got this list memorized, right? We're only going to be, for time constraints, we're probably only going to be going about 80% of those. And, but remember this whole time that people are really, really complicated. One person is probably going to be taking multiple roles over time in different contexts, and you're going to have multiple people swapping in and out of the same role. And so, without further ado, let's begin. One of the most common things that you'll see in groups is somebody will show up and say, oh, we've already got a system that's running in production, and standards body, please bless this for us, turn it into a standard so that our product is standards compliant because we invented the standard. Don't change anything, don't look too close, and don't pay attention to this part that's completely underspecified because that's our special sauce, and that's why it is the only thing that makes it work. Be especially wary if you've got a startup that comes in to your group and says, hey, we've got this great new thing, let's make it a standard. Really, guys, this is going to be great. I'll even hand you the rubber stamp. Now, this is not to say that technological implementation is not a good thing to have. Absolutely not. One of the best characters that you can run into is the developer, somebody who can say, I have something like this in production, but you know what? That thing that we were talking about on the list last week, I tried that in our dev environment, and it kind of works. That other idea that was coming across, if we were to implement that, I would have to completely gut our data layer, and that would never, never fly. Incredibly valuable input for somebody to be able to come in and do that. So developers, highly, highly important. You get people in these groups that love the newest, shiniest things that come along, and if I had a Lego brick that represented the blockchain, she would be sitting on it. And if you have ever worked with a JavaScript developer, you know this problem really well. And the problem is not just that they get excited about things, but they get excited about things on the course of about every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, it's a new and shiny thing, and if you're constantly changing the target that your standard is going to be built upon, it's not going to work. You're never going to have something that actually works. If you can take, however, this energy of wanting to try new things and break through the frontiers, you can actually start to explore new worlds, new surfaces, and really get an idea for what could happen. But always, always with the goal of being able to fulfill what exactly you're trying to do within your group. What is the problem that you're ultimately trying to solve? Now, there is a character that will show up at your working group if you're incredibly unlucky, who will suck all of the life out of everything around him and will just absolutely stall all forward progress with things like, we need to think about this. Should we really even be thinking about this? We need to think about whether or not we should be thinking about this. So heaven help you if the Nazgul should set his sights upon you. The standards process, because it's made out of people and their communication channels are exploitable, and some people are really, really good at exploiting this. So you will occasionally find people who say, will bring up an idea on a list or something like that, and then suddenly you get the same group of 5 or 6 people that will just be +1ing that idea. Well, that's because somebody has gone around in the background and said, like, hey, my idea is going to be coming up for vote. I could really love if I could get some support for that. That'd be really great. And this happens a lot more than we like to realize. Corollary to this, there are people who actually trade favors. Oh, hey, I heard you've got a vote coming up. Be a shame if something bad happened to that, right? You know, I got a vote coming up too. Let's work something out here. They can probably call it synergy and lots of other things. But really what's going on is that people are negotiating. And so you not only got to look out for people who are exploiting those channels, but you also got to make sure that you're using those channels for positive ends, that people are communicating as things are going forward. It's really, really common in these groups, especially because you have a lot of really committed, angry nerds, that arguments will break out, and so it's incredibly valuable to have somebody who can actually arbitrate between different sides of an argument and say, like, okay, you said this and you said this, and when you actually bring those two together, you might not actually be fighting with each other at all. You might actually be talking about 2 totally different things, and somebody needs to be able to bring the emotion of the conversation down to a level that you can actually do some work with that. These are very valuable. Something a little bit less valuable is the person who decides that they're really more of an ideas person, and they're just going to show up, and we're going to solve world hunger and world peace with nuclear rocket surgery, and the implementation details will sort itself out when the engineers get a hold of it. They're smart. They'll get that. These people show up a lot at standards organizations because you end up having people that have really lofty goals, that really do want to change the world, and that's lovely. But there's a big ocean boiling problem that happens when you fall prey to this. Now, when you're looking at a particular problem, you can end up having people that say, like, okay, in order to solve this problem, we need to first solve this precondition, and then solve this precondition, and then solve this precondition, and yada, yada, yada. Okay, first we need to shave a yak. And then we can actually solve the thing that our working group is working on. The thing about this, though, is that your working group doesn't have to solve all of the problems in the world. You can probably depend on there being things like computers and electricity. You don't have to reinvent those in order for you to solve whatever little bit of the internet that you are trying to work on, or whatever standard space you're working in. Unless, of course, you're working on electricity and computers as your standards. That's another story. It's incredibly valuable to have somebody who can articulate between 2 different groups and say, like, okay, you're saying that we've got a whole stack of red things. You're saying that we've got a whole stack of blue things. What that really means is that we can build a wall. And I didn't mean to quote Trump in this talk, I swear. We can build a wall out of these red and blue things, and it's this really cool red and blue zigzaggy pattern. And this is what we actually have. We have this thing that is made out of these bits together. Right? These are incredibly, incredibly valuable people that need to be cherished and nurtured inside these groups. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you get people who don't see that larger picture and get stuck on one tiny thing. And this phrase comes from arguing over what color to paint the door of the bike shed before you build it, let alone even agreeing that you have bikes that you need to store in a shed. Take this to its extreme, and you get people who decide that there is no hill that is too small for them to die upon for their cause. And heaven help you if they are your senior editor, because they will take you on the road to hell. That's a story for another time. Floating around the edges of your group, you will have people that would probably love to contribute, but they are scared stiff by all of the crazies in your group, including you. So you need to look out for these people. You need to be able to bring them in, because they probably have very valuable insights that they can bring to the working group, stuff from the outside that you probably haven't thought of before. Now, you will occasionally get people showing up that expect everybody to do what they says because of who they are. Not necessarily because of something that they've contributed to the group, but just because of their own status. And they kind of carry that status with them throughout their standards work. And I know quite a number of these that show up, especially around the IETF. It's really, really common. Take that to another extreme, and you get people who get notoriety in an external field, a completely unrelated field, who get used to being the expert and then show up in a new space. And they like to start sentences with like, well, I was in private practice for 30 years working on podiatry, and so here are my opinions on internet security standards, and you should really listen to me because I'm a doctor. And that happens more often than you would ever think is true. There are people out there, though, who have very true battle-hardened wisdom. These are the people that it's tough to pull out between sort of the egotistical rock stars and everybody else, but there are people out there who really do know what they're talking about. When you find these people, sit at their knee and drink from the fount of their wisdom. These are very incredibly valuable people. Now, the stuff that they're talking about may not be something that is sort of directly contributed into your group. They might just be kind of on the periphery of your group. But you really need to be able to recognize that there are people that have a lot to contribute just because they've lived through a lot of things. You'll get people in standards worlds that will just swoop in out of nowhere and dump a whole bunch of what they perceive to be wisdom on the group and then disappear and say like, okay, this needs to be blue because I said it's going to be blue, and I'll see you in 4 months, let me know when it's blue. And this happens a whole lot in the standard space because people don't always work on standards all the time. I know, people have lives, right? It's kind of crazy. And it can be a really problematic thing in a working group because these are the kinds of people that can distract a conversation that a working group might be having and sort of moving everything forward. This person will come in and dump something completely sideways on the group, and that can put a whole lot of energy in the group to pulling it back on track. So be careful about this. This can, however, this type of engagement can, however, be channeled more positively because you can get people that are coming in from the outside that haven't been paying attention to the stuff that you're working on, but have been paying attention to something else. And they can say like, oh, you know what? The stuff that we're working on, the stuff that you're working on, it probably kind of makes sense. Maybe we could look at the similarities and look at how this might work together. This is a really, really valuable thing to be able to do. So I encourage you guys to actually take this role and say like, okay, this is the stuff that I know. There's something over there that I don't know much about, but it kind of feels like it might have something in common. I'm going to go learn about that. I'm going to go talk to these people, and I'm going to go contribute there. You will occasionally get people that show up with their own problem and their own solution, and no matter what it is that you're trying to solve, they just want to build a spaceship. And doesn't matter what question that you're asking, they're going to build a spaceship. And you're going to run into these people. Unfortunately, they take a lot of energy out of the group because they tend to just be really, really excited about what it is that they're doing. Now, come on, slides. I don't have much time. There's a whole lot of folks out there that are really, really good about working through processes. All of these different standards organizations have different formal processes for getting documents and proposals and everything through. There are people that get really, really stuck on the process to the detriment of everything else. Now, it doesn't matter what the process is actually trying to accomplish for these folks. They are just concerned that the process itself is being followed. It doesn't matter what you're actually trying to do with it. Again, take this same type of skill set, the same type of mentality, and channel that so that you're actually working towards a goal. You're actually working towards a point. And now you have somebody who can act as a very effective project manager for your unruly group of angry nerds. And get people out of these little petty arguments and say, like, you know what? We're going to move things forward. We're actually going to roll this. You'll get people that show up that are so enamored with whatever set of ideas that they have that they will not stop talking about them, and they will absolutely talk your ear off. I have no idea what that's like. And the thing about these, though, is that they will tell you about these things because they believe you will convert because they're right. You will see the light eventually if they just keep going on about it, and you will come around to their side. These people actually do have a lot of really interesting things to say if you can shave off about 98% of the words that come out of their mouths. There's still some really good stuff that these people do tend to bring into the conversation. However, take this to its other extreme, and you'll get people who will convert you or kill you in the process. That's really the binary choice that they offer people. And, excuse me, I should probably take a breath every now and again. These people will just adamantly insist that not only is their idea the right idea, it is the only idea that should ever be considered. This can be very detrimental to a working group. And the truth is, there's a whole lot of different things that you run into in these groups. You have no idea what you're going to run across, and a lot of times you have no idea what to deal with, how to deal with the people that you're running across. So now that you have this big bag of people, what do we do with them? We make sausage, right? So, my first piece of advice is to keep everything focused. Know what it is that you're actually trying to solve. Have a general idea of how you're trying to solve it. And definitely listen to the new ideas. Look for your explorers. Look for your cross-pollinators. Look for your newbies, people who can inject new information into your group, but move that conversation forward to an actual goal. Know what it is that you're doing. Come on. It's absolutely vital to build things. A specification without an implementation is nothing but ivory tower academic wankery. It makes absolutely no sense. It's not real. Get out there and build things. If you're not a person who builds things, find somebody who does build things and get them to build it. This is how we know that things actually work. Can you imagine if we had specifications and standards for electricity without anybody ever plugging anything in a lab to see whether or not it blew up? This is why we have UL labs and CE and all of these other things. It's very important to actually get out there and build things and see what happens. A lot of times with people, you need to dig down into what they're saying, past what they're saying really, to find out what it is that they actually need. And this means listening to people, actively listening to people, and hearing like, all right, so you're telling me that you need A, but what I'm hearing is that your requirement is actually W, and A would satisfy W for you. So maybe if we concentrate on W here for you, we can set A aside for a little bit and work through this because there might be something else that we can actually do. This doesn't mean that you accept everything that everybody says coming in because that would be absolutely crazy, but you can dig down and find out what people actually need. Everything takes longer than you expect it to. Be patient. It's going to take a long time, and especially your ideas, it's going to seem like it's going to take a long time for your ideas to go through, and everybody else's seems to be just chattering through without any opposition, especially if you're working with or against, perhaps, somebody who is playing the politician or one of the other roles, or especially if the gaze of the Nazgul falls upon you, cursed though you may be. Be willing to choose your fights. It's important to know that the hill that you chose to die on is actually worth dying on. And remember that dying is actually an option when you choose to die on a hill, right? Choosing to make a stand does not mean that you're going to win. So make sure that when you actually make these fights that it really does matter, that it really is worth it, and you can articulate why that is. Keep records of everything that you're doing. In the groups that I work with, we use open, publicly archived mailing lists, issue trackers, source control, all sorts of tools that make the record of the decisions and the conversation of the group going forward available so that people can actually see this and join this and move on. And it's important to if you're going to be running one of these groups, to drive the consensus forward, sometimes using a little bit more force than others. This is where the role of a project manager can come into a little bit play, and I think it kind of telling that in Congress they call this role the whip. And in any case, there's a lot that you can do to move the conversation past the squabbles and arguments that people tend to have just because there are people together working on something that they care about, and you want to drive people towards a consensus. That's not necessarily an agreement, but at the very least a consensus that you can go forward with. And most importantly, get people to talk to each other. It's the people, it's the relationships between the people, it's the understanding between the people that actually makes these things work. If technology existed on its own merits, the robots wouldn't need us anymore, right? Give us about 20 years, we'll probably be at that state. For the next 20 years, we need to get people talking to each other still. And the quote here is that communication is best served with short round trip times and alcohol, and this really just means get people together, get people to know each other, so that they not only can talk to each other with a lot of high bandwidth, but also know that you're a person and I'm a person, and we have some commonality and humanality, unless of course you're dealing with the Nazgul in case this doesn't apply. In the end, standards development doesn't really run out of time. These things can go on for ages and years and eons in internet time. And a lot of times, at least a couple of times that come to my memory, the standard actually is ratified long past the time when the market had anything to do with it. And this happens quite a lot. So there's not really an external timer that's imposed on this. You don't really run out of time. We're also not building bridges or software systems or things like that. There's not a budget to run out. You don't really run out of money when you're building up these things. However, standards do eventually finish, so you don't run out of time. You don't run out of money, but what you run out of is patience. Eventually, you and your working group will look at this thing and say, like, you know what? That's good enough, all right? It's a close enough solution. It fits enough of our use cases, and it doesn't destroy the world completely. Let's ship it. And there's a lot of value into shipping that, and you need to make sure that when you get to this point of running out of patience, not if, but when you get to this point of running out of patience, what you have is something that you can actually stamp your name on, and will actually make the world a better place. So I leave you with that thought and ask, what will you now build? The world is made out of standards. We can build things with the standards, and we can build new standards within this space. Thank you all very much.
I have the mic, so I get the first question. Which one are you?
I am so many of these, it's really kind of crazy. When I was putting this presentation together, it was really a little bit embarrassing how much of myself I saw in a lot of the negative archetypes, as well as, in some cases, I hope, the positive archetypes as well. And so I am many of them. I strive to be a developer in a lot of groups. Somebody who can be like, hey, I took this thing and I built it, because that's my background. I'm a software engineer. But I know that I can be a bit of a fighter at times, and I've definitely been known to shave a yak in my day.
How much did you spend on new Lego pieces?
Great question. So background to this is that all of the Legos in that actually is from my and my family's personal collection. And I don't know. Most of those we actually had, and one I actually want to particularly point out. Oh no. I had most of these. There it is. It was actually my 3-year-old daughter that actually built the horse-mounted armored Batman. And that was literally just sitting in the bin, and I'm like, I am totally using this. This is amazing. And yeah, we had most of these. I think we picked up a couple of sets that I was like, oh, this has a minifig that it's got an expression that I can probably use, but I don't think I actually spent any specifically extra.
So you had a Bucky?
Yes, actually, I've had a Bucky since it was a promotional item last summer, and I taunted Laura with it until she went and bought one on her own. Any other questions? All right, thank you all very much.